Hello and welcome to an MCI from 500 feet, brought to you by the OAKWAY Mutual Aid Group. This video is produced by the Waterford Regional Fire Department. OAKWAY, or MABAS 3202, is comprised of 11 full-time career municipal fire departments. Each year, one OAKWAY Fire Department takes the lead to organize, design, and deploy a mass casualty incident training event. The 2023 event is scheduled for September 22, 2023 and is being coordinated, planned, and designed by the Waterford Regional Fire Department. In preparation for this event, multiple videos and other training resources will be made available to all OAKWAY Fire Departments and related emergency service agencies and hospitals. We will continue to post training videos and other information on our YouTube channel at OAKWAY Training. This presentation is hosted by Jeff Lassers from the West Bloomfield Township Fire Department. During this video, Captain Jim Cooper and Lieutenant Jake Helgemo from the Waterford Regional Fire Department will provide an overview of the key roles that make up the incident command structure at a mass casualty incident. Specifically, Coop and Jake will describe the responsibilities of the 5 critical roles assigned by the incident commander at an MCI. Enjoy the show. Good morning, gentlemen. How are you?
Good morning, Jeff.
Morning, Jeff. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Welcome back. Kick us off, Cap. Who are you? What do you do and where do you do it?
My name is Jim Cooper. I'm a captain here at the Waterford Regional Fire Department. I've been in the fire service since 1996. And this year, I've taken upon ourselves to volunteer Waterford to lead the MCI drill for OAKWAY.
Yeah, every year an OAKWAY Fire Department takes on the lead role of planning, designing, and executing one of these exercises. It's a way to remind ourselves that it might happen, and it keeps getting closer to home. Unfortunately, experienced it in our county in the last few years, and in Michigan State recently, we had another active assailant. We also have tornadoes in Michigan and other things that can cause MCIs. So it's important that we're always preparing our fire and EMS, police, everything, the whole system, to medical control authorities, hospitals, and the National Guard, even if we need to get ready for the big one. So Jake, who are you? What do you do and where do you do it?
My name is Jake Helgemo. I'm a lieutenant here with the Waterford Regional Fire Department. Just started as the EMS coordinator in January of this year, and I've been here since 2007. So as my role with the EMS coordinator, I'm assisting Captain Cooper here with the development and planning of the OAKWAY MCI event this year.
Right on. In our previous discussion, we were flying at an altitude of about 30,000 feet, giving an overview of what an MCI looks like. Really, this broad global perspective, what's going on at an MCI. Today, our tour of this MCI is going to lower the altitude to 500 feet and to get into some more nuanced detail. So really, our previous discussion was on the theory, and this is going to be a bit more of the application in our county specifically, dialing into OAKWAY as well, but also giving recommendations to everybody else on what they need to be prepared for at their agency, their fire department, EMS, police, hospitals, that everybody needs to just be prepared for what we're going to do in response to an MCI.
So we started out with a 30,000-foot view of MCIs and just took a broad look at MCI events and what they look like. Now with the 500-foot view, we're dialing into these different pillars that are part of the incident management system. The 5 critical roles of an MCI beyond the incident commander are the staging officer, triage officer, treatment officer, transport officer, and then you got an EMS Communications officer. So once the incident commander has been established, you need to refer to your incident action plan. That should help you roll out these 5 positions. And then depending on the size and complexity of the incident, you might have to assign a PIO and a safety officer as well.
So really it's that like checklist of like, okay, I get it. MCIs happen. That's the 30,000-foot view, and there's these protocols, there's rules, there's all these things that are supposed to happen to a cascade of when we hit this button, right?
Right.
But now it's like, okay, when it does, I need to have all these things prepared literally in my truck. You mentioned a number of positions there. Staging officer, I mean, that guy's got to wear a vest. Do we have that? There's like a bag that goes with that. There's all these tags and triage stuff. There's the RTF kits. There's all the stuff, and it's almost like we need to have this discussion of a very detailed checklist of all the things before we even get the call.
Right, yeah. So walk out to your command vehicle. Do we have these vests here? Do we have the checklist? If I assign X member staging officer, is that person ready to be the staging officer? Do they know the roles and responsibilities with that? So really, these trainings are to get us to blow the dust off of these folders and take a look at, are we prepared for this?
So really, it's a 5-point checklist of what we need to be prepared for. Walk us through that overview of the 5, and then let's get into the details of each.
Yeah, so the 5 critical roles are incident commander, staging officer, triage officer, treatment officer, and a transport officer. Then depending on the complexity of the incident, you might roll out a public information officer, logistics officers, depending on the complexity. But those 5 are really the 5 critical parts of an MCI.
So really you're saying is deploy those 5 things to automatically create our unified command structure.
Yes.
Once those things get deployed, it's creating that structure to allow the other things to operate. And it's not like other things aren't happening at the same time.
Right. And that's a great point, like you said, too, the unified command portion of this. When you look at MCIs, you're not just operating solely as just a fire department, just an ambulance company. You're unified command with your police department, your private ambulance companies, your utility companies, whatever the incident might be calling for, the unified command is crucial.
So Jim, let's get into the details of some of these. Let's start with the incident commander and then talk about all these different sectors of the unified command structure of that we need to be staffing essentially.
Okay, so probably the first most important role is the incident commander. And again, it doesn't have to be an officer. It's going to be that first arriving unit to get these things set up so this incident can be organized throughout. The responsibility of the incident commander is to then assign people to the roles, the other roles that Jake mentioned.
So when they're in that role, like you said, it's the first arriving officer or senior member, however it's defined in that area. But it can also be passed along. So it's not like that person's going to be the IC for the duration. If I show up, I'm looking for you to hand this off as fast as possible. I'll go in there and get to work. I don't want the stress of the IC job at that. One day it might be mine, but let's keep it not for now. But in reality, it's get that set up because once we set the IC, we have a position set up to keep making decisions to fill out the rest of the unified command structure. And It's going to be these other positions. And number one being staging officer, in my opinion, because we got to find places to put these people.
Right, yeah, so you want to get the staging officer set up as quickly as possible because if you think about it, once you push that button and you call for all these resources, they are coming. And what you want to do is have this to be organized so that you know which resources that you have at your availability for this incident. So staging officer will also get a vest and a clipboard where he has a log so he can log which resources that are coming to the staging area. The staging area itself needs to be defined, truly defined, by physical location, including address if possible. We want this location to be close enough to the scene where they can respond quickly, but not so close to the scene where it's disorganized.
I think, too, also, as we talk about these positions that are instrumental, a lot of this is going to be resource-driven. Depending on where you're at, there might only be 2 of you for a little while. And a lot of this is, we know this has to be set up, but a lot of it is resource-driven. So it has to be in the back of your mind if you're the incident commander that, okay, I need to fill these spots, but it's resource-driven based on what you have available to you on the scene.
All right, Jake, walk us through the triage officer.
After you've established your IC and your staging, you've got a triage officer now, and depending on how many patients that we are suspecting, the triage officer is going to be responsible for developing a strategy and coordinating the triage. We talked about the SALT triage method. And then as people are coming down from staging, you're requesting resources. 2 people can't triage 100 victims, so we need to be requesting resources, developing that plan, reminding people as they come down, hey, your triage, remember we're using the SALT triage method.
Okay, so the triage officer is really helping develop that triage strategy and coordinate triage.
Correct.
So they're not doing it all, they're more like handling that task.
Correct.
So when the IC says handle it, they just know somebody's doing it somewhere, coordinating with those resources.
Correct. And that's where the sheets inside the Oakland County protocol, again, when I say you're the triage officer, I'm going to hand you a vest. I'm going to hand you a piece of paper that has your primary and secondary responsibilities on it. That's going to look different at every municipality. Here in Waterford, it's going to be on one of our 2 command trucks. There's vests, there's clipboards. Here you go. Do your thing.
All right, cool. So now about treatment officer. What does that person do?
Remember, treatment doesn't start until everybody's been triaged. So once triage is complete and your triage officer has announced that triage is complete, now we can start the treatment of patients, bringing them back to a collection point, coordinating the movement of patients from wherever the incident was, where they were triaged, back to the treatment area, and ultimately to transport. And then also providing continuous secondary triage. somebody may have been triaged yellow 20 minutes ago, but they may have deteriorated. Now they're red. So that secondary triage has to continuously be going on, and the treatment officer is responsible to make sure that that's happening.
When we say treatment, we're talking beyond the life-saving interventions applied inside the building or around wherever that casualty is. We're still doing quote-unquote treatments in the form of life-saving interventions, but then the treatment doesn't happen as the typical EMS provider, primary survey, see what I got, treat the wounds, the way we normally would happens at those points, right?
That salt triage and using the March method, we're still life-saving interventions, tourniquets, massive bleeding control. You're doing that during your triage portion, but the more in-depth treatment happens back at the treatment area.
Yeah, so it's a semantic of words, but to help everybody understand. Perfect. What's next, Jim? Is that the transport officer? We got to get off scene now, right?
Absolutely. So after they've staged, right, we've done all our triage. Okay, patients have made it over to the treatment areas and they've received treatment, and now it's time to get them to the hospital. So with that being said, from the communication would go from the staging officer to the transport officer to have the rescues or the ambulance come to transport these patients.
So I think also too with the transport officer it's a very important position that should not be overlooked, and the tedious task of recording every patient that comes in with that MCI tag, recording their number, their name, if you can get it. A lot of these people, you might not know their name, because the information that you're recording on this transport log, when these family members start showing up and wanting to know where their family member was transported, if the transport officer did their job, it should be a seamless process. We should be able to help these people in the reunification process. But if you didn't record the tag numbers, their name, if you could get it, a description of what they're wearing, approximate age and gender, the reunification process is going to be a mess. So the transport officer has a lot on their shoulders, and it should not be overlooked.
So it's not just some menial, tedious task. That's me going to find my daughters.
Correct.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a lot of people, depending on the size of the incident, showing up wanting to know where their son, where their daughter, where their wife, their husband, whoever it might be, their family member, where they were transported to.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah. I also would say that each of these 5 roles, as soon as the resources or staffing permits, let's get somebody over there to help out with these roles, right? If we're trying to log 100 patients, I think that's a bit much for one person. So to have a assistant in the transport area and also the triage area, that'll help out a lot. Staging area, then they can communicate just as well and keep track of the resources.
Yeah, you're right. The bigger the incident, the more help you're going to need. One person. And let's face it, that's a lot of stress.
It is.
Even having a helping hand near you to do the little stuff helps out a whole lot.
Yep.
Okay, Jim, so like the transport officer, the EMS communications person is kind of related to that. How does that differentiate from transport? Because you're transporting EMS patients to a hospital.
So the EMS communication officer, that's it. The primary thing is to communicate with the hospitals to find out if they can keep or accept so many patients, right? And also to alert the hospitals, let them know that we have 65 patients here. What can you take, right? Can you take the 4 that you said, or can you take more?
Yeah, could you imagine the radio traffic of everybody trying to call in their patients at once?
Right.
One through a cell phone, you got one on the 800, you got another one through eBridge, the eBridge machine smoking in the ER.
Absolutely, yeah.
That'd be crazy. So that person's really responsible from understanding, I got 17 reds, 6 greens, 4 yellows, all those things, and then identifying where to send these people, notifying those different hospitals, because we're not filling up the closest hospital.
Oh, absolutely.
We're going to be sharing the hospital so that each patient is given the commensurate amount of attention they need for the best chance of a good outcome.
Right, yeah.
So the transport officer is really accumulating the data to know what we have and what we need to get to a hospital, whereas the EMS communications officer is the one logistically figuring out who I can take where. So the transport officer doesn't have to think about which hospitals they need to go to. They're just organizing what they have and telling the EMS communications officer and maybe a couple of their assistants what they have so that they can continuously and most efficiently get them off scene to the most appropriate facility.
That's correct.
Okay, so it seems really easy. Just go do that.
Sounds easy.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so it sounds like for the EMS communications officer, it's really making sure your radio can get to 63 OAKH. identifying the use of eBridge and maybe looking in your protocol to make sure you got all the things ready, all the things printed off that we can. Now, I know most agencies absolutely do, but I like doing this every year because things change. Sometimes radio channels change. Sometimes radios that we don't normally use on a different truck or on a special response vehicle might need to be updated. There's always little things. So I think what we're saying here today is the little things are the big things on game day.
That's right.
Go through your stuff. The vests, the piece of paper, talking about the data we need of a transport of a patient, of who we're dealing with so that we can reunify them, the number of people we have, there's a lot going on here. And this is our opportunity to kind of make a checklist for every agency, remind them what the rules are, what the protocols say, and then allow them that autonomy to then meet that.
Right. It's that little thing that's missing that could just throw you off, right? Throw the whole game off. So
yeah,
let's check and make sure that we have it.
So that's a lot. You're balancing, notifying every hospital that it's happening. In the meantime, somebody else is mustering all of these resources, and hopefully we have droves of transport ambulances ready to go, lined up like an Uber after a concert. And then after that, hopefully we're able to tell everybody, hey, this is how much you're getting and who, and then to make it actually happen.
Absolutely.
And all that's in our protocol.
Yep, it's in our protocol. There's also a sheet for the transport officer to log where these patients are going. So that transport officer, just like Jake said, he's going to get a vest. He's going to get a clipboard that has the papers inside. The papers inside will let him know which hospitals can take which patients prior to the event even starting per our protocols based off the communications that we had before.
All right, guys. So as we close out, there's, I think, an acknowledgement that although there's these 5 primary roles at an MCI, like any size of incident, the bigger it grows, the more needs you're going to have. So I'm sure there's some final considerations that are outside that 5. So close us out with some final thoughts on things to consider beyond that.
Yeah. So there's no cookie cutter mold here for what an MCI is going to look like. And depending on the complexity, there's other positions that we're going to think about as well. A public information officer. You determine that a 5-patient incident is an MCI for your municipality. You declare an MCI. Is the media going to show up? Maybe not. You get an incident with 20 patients, you can bet that the media is going to be there. And establishing a PIO is crucial. And beforehand, identifying who we want to be our PIO and sending them the training. There's trainings out there so that people can prepare to handle the media. I know you stick cameras in front of my face, and I'm not ready to answer questions on a large-scale MCI to the media. Reunification, that's a huge issue with MCIs. Like we were talking earlier with the transport officer, really being diligent about recording MCI tag numbers and where these people are transported to assist families reunifying with their loved ones.
A couple of more things just to close up would be how to end the incident, right? How to demobilize all the resources that you have, and when should that be done? And last but not least is the recovery aspect, right? So recovery aspect for the first responders and also recovery aspect for the community, whether it be emotional through incident stress management or whether it's physical, right, through rehab and getting the workforce back together.
Yeah, and maybe putting the buildings back together.
And putting the buildings back
together. Things knock over buildings.
Right. Reloading the truck with supplies that we use, right?
Yeah,
just
getting ready to go to the next one.
Yeah, just because we have an MCI in Waterford doesn't mean that there's not a chest pain over in Pontiac or Lake Angeles. So we have to be ready for that.
Fantastic words, guys. I think this was a great overview to kind of get us closer to the MCI and really inspire people to train more. And that's really what we're trying to do. We're not telling anybody what to do. We're just trying to bring a lot of distilled information to the surface so people can look at it and say, okay, let me go look at my truck today. And I think we're kind of doing that. So thank you guys very much for your time.
Thanks a lot, Jeff.
Thanks for having us.